All right, this is Coach Williams, and we are going to go over the notes for 9.4. On 9.4, we're going to just add a step to what we've learned already in Chapter 9. We've learned how to take the square root of both sides when we've got the factored form of something, like if we have an x plus 2 squared on one side and it equals some number. We can take the square root of both sides to solve for x. Knowing that if something is squared, then the square root of that something squared is just the something. We learned that in one of our previous lessons and videos as well. But today we're going to learn about completing the square, and that is when they give us part of an equation without the c term in there. And so we're going to have to find c and add it to both sides to get to the point where we can take the factored form, the something squared, to solve the equation. I know that may sound a lot like gibberish here, but completing this square is whenever they give you, let's say they give you an x squared plus a bx, and then they want us to find this c term, and this whole thing may equal some other number. We'll just say it equals, let's say it equals t, some value t. What we'll have to do is we'll have to add this c to both sides. And as long as we add the same thing to both sides, then we know that through our history in algebra that as long as we do this, add the same thing to both sides, we haven't changed the equation. So this will allow us to take this right here, factor it into its x plus, whatever squared, and that's going to equal t plus c over here. And then we can take the square root of both sides and solve for x. So completing the square is just finding c, adding to both sides, and then solving. Using square roots, you would probably add on, which was we've already done that. We've already covered it. So solving using square roots, okay, which we've done that in the previous section. So we're going to find the c, we're going to add to both sides, and we're going to solve using square roots. Because at this point we would just take the square root of both sides and then find out what x would be to make it equal that. And we'll get to that stage here in a few minutes using some examples. But let's look at completing the square. To complete the square for an expression of the form x squared plus bx, follow these steps. Find 1/2 of b, which is the coefficient of x. So we're looking at this term right there. We're going to take and find half of that. Then we're going to square the result from step 1, and then we're going to add it to this x squared plus bx. So we will take b divided by 2, and then we'll square it. And what this really ends up equaling is our c term. So b over 2 squared will be equal to c. You'll notice here that all we have to do, and then this right here is what we're adding to x for our perfect square. That b minus 2, or b divided by 2, is actually this term that we put inside here. Sorry, draw a little arrow to the right location. That's what we're going to put. That's what we're going to put here when we factor that out. An example of that here, if we look at the extra practice, you'll start to see this pretty quickly here. If we have this is my b term, right? This is ax squared plus bx. Right? So b over 2 squared is going to be 12 over 2, and we square that, and what will that result be? It's 12 divided by 2 is what? 6. And then 6 squared is 36. So at this point they want us to complete the square, and then they just want us to factor the trinomial. So I know that this is going to be x squared plus 12x plus 36. Remember that when I factor it, x plus b over 2 squared is what this is going to be. And we already know what that should be, because when we multiply or fold these out, all it is just doubling that term for the middle one. So we just take that divided by 2. So it's x plus 6 squared. And that is my answer at this point. I found C. This was equal to C. So I found my C term. I put it in with the rest of the terms there to complete this trinomial, this quadratic trinomial form there. And then we just factored it into its perfect square. Okay, so again, it's not too difficult. This step's not too difficult. We'll add this to what we've learned before when we get to the back page here. But what's this one going to be here? We're going to take negative 14 divided by 2. That's going to equal what? I'm not going to square it yet. I just wanted to get this part here. What's this going to be? Negative 7. Right? And remember that b over 2 is my factor. So I should get to this answer in a minute. I should get to x minus 7 squared. Right? But I'm going to have to take negative 7 and square it to find C. So negative 7 squared is going to be a positive 49. That is C. So x squared minus 14x plus 49 is my trinomial of this quadratic, right? This quadratic with 3 terms. And that is a perfect square. If I were to divide that by 2, square it, I get 49. If I were to take x minus 7 times x minus 7, it would give me x minus 14x plus 49. Let's do that off to the side over here for a second, just so we can see that all we're doing is just working backwards, okay? So if I took this right here, and I'm going to pull this out over to the side, okay? Let's take x minus 7 times x minus 7. Okay? I know that I'm going to take and just distribute that into both terms on the other side. I'm going to take this and distribute it into both terms on the other side. So I'm going to have x squared minus 7x, and then negative 7x times x will be another negative 7x, and then negative 7 times negative 7 will be a positive 49. When I add those two middle terms together, I end up with x squared minus 14x plus 49. So all we've done here is we've just worked backwards, right? We've gone in and we said, well, we know that when something's times itself, we just take those two terms on the outside and just add them together. We just double it. So that gives us our middle terms, and then we multiply those two to get the last term. All right, so knowing that is how it works whenever we have perfect squares, we can apply that to find that third term if we are completing the square. And we're talking about perfect squares again. Then we can find that third term, and we know that it's just going to be this divided by 2 and then squared. Okay, so this is my answer on number 2. Number 3, we're going to have, let's find our C term. So b divided by 2 squared equals C. Remember, that's our formula up there. And b divided by 2 will be our term that we put with x to square in a minute. But let's find the C first. We're going to have 4 divided by 2 squared, and that's going to give us 2. We have 4 divided by 2. I'm sorry, 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So now x squared plus 4x plus 4 is my trinomial, right? The quadratic expression of a perfect square. We've completed the square. And if I take this, divide this by 2, then I'm going to get my term that I add to x to square. Okay? What about number 4? Somebody give me an answer for number 4. I'm going to take the middle term, divide by 2, and square it, what is this going to be? It's going to be x squared plus 18x plus what? 81. Right? Because 9 will be 18 divided by 2. We square it, it'll give us 81. Right? So also we know that this is just going to be what? X plus what squared? If I take 18 divided by 2, or I take the square root of 81, either one gives me the same answer. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 81, square root of 81 will give me 9. And so this is just x plus 9 squared. That's the answer for number 4. All right, what about number 5? This one we get a little bit tricky because we have to deal with a decimal. And that's fine. We can deal with decimals. Just round to the nearest 100th whenever we're dealing with these for now. So what is negative 7 divided by 2 squared? Well, negative 7 divided by 2 is a negative 3.5, right? And a negative 3.5 squared is going to be what? 12.25. 12.25. So that's my C. So I'm going to have x squared minus 7x plus the C. Okay, that's 12.25 there. And this is a perfect square. I know it's got decimals, but this is a perfect square. What is it? X, is it plus or minus? Minus, and what is it minusing? 3.5. Yeah, 3.5. Because 3.5 times 2 gives me that middle term, just like we talked about up here. 7 plus the 7, or negative 7 plus negative 7, gave me my middle terms. It gave me that negative 14, right? So here, what two terms added together will give me a negative 7, being the same term plus itself. So two negative 3.5s will give me a negative 7. And then if I square that, that gives me my 12.25. So that is my factored form of the expression here after we complete the square. All right, what about number 11? Number 11, same thing, going to end up with a decimal. Yeah, so we'll have 11 divided by 2 squared, and that's going to give you my C term. 11 divided by 2 is going to be 5.5, and then we're going to end up with what? 30.25 when we square that. Okay, so then we're going to have x squared plus 11x plus 30.25. Then, if I'm taking my factored form of this, I'm just taking half of 11 to get this term that's right here. Remember, this is the same thing as b over 2. So b over 2 will give me 5.5 squared. And we factored it now after completing the square. Not too difficult, really. Just remembering that one little step there, that b divided by 2 squared is going to help us find the C term. Now on the back, we're going to add the steps that we've done before with solving. Okay, so now we're going to solve the equation by completing the square. So we're going to solve it this time. And we're going to round our solutions to the nearest 100th if necessary. All right, so on the back here, we're going to do this. We're going to take and still finding b over 2 squared. Okay, still finding that. So this is going to be a negative 8 over 2, and we're going to square it. So what's negative 8 divided by 2? It's a negative 4. And then we're going to square negative 4. That's going to give us a positive 16. Okay? When we have a positive 16, what we're going to have to do with this now is we're going to complete the square on this left side. So we're going to say x squared minus 8x plus the 16. Now remember, golden rule of algebra. If we add 16 to one side, whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other in order to keep the equation true. So we're going to have to say, well, we've got a negative 15 over here. We've got to add 16 to that side. Right? So we've added this 16 to both sides keeping the equation equal. Okay, keeping it true. All right, so now I can write this in factored form. What's the factored form of this? X what? Minus 4. Right? Squared, because we just take this 8 divided by 2, it gives us the 4. We have x minus 4 squared. All right, and then on the right side, I have negative 15 and 16. We have a 1. And this is beginning to look like the problems we had from 9.3. Solving by square roots. Right? 9.2 and 3, we talked about solving by square roots. So we're going to look at this now. We're going to take the square root of both sides. In fact, we just had a quiz over those two sections. So this should be pretty familiar at this point. We take the square root of something squared. It's just the something, right? So we just have x minus 4. The square root of 1 is 1. But remember, it's a positive or a negative 1. So we have to have two solutions here we're going to have to work out. So we're going to have x minus 4 equals 1 and x minus 4 equals negative 1. And then we solve for x. So we're going to take and add 4 to both sides. I'm going to move this over there, so it means I'm going to add 4 to both sides, and x is going to equal 5. Negative 4, move it over here, means I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So then x is going to equal 3. And that is my solution for number 7 using the method of completing the square. Okay? Does that make sense, what we did there? We used the step we learned today to complete the square, and then we used what we learned in the previous two sections about using square roots and solving by square roots. Okay? Well, one of those sections was graphing, but the other one was square roots. All right, so let's look at number 8. Okay, we need to complete the square on the left side. So we take this b term. We're going to have b divided by 2 squared, right? So we're going to have 2 divided by 2 squared is going to give me my c term. And that's just going to be 1. Because 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is still 1. So, on the left, x squared plus 2x plus 1. Well, again, I have added this 1 to the left side, so I've got to set up the right side and add 1 to it as well. I've got to add 1 to both sides to keep this equation true. All right, so now, what is the factored form of the left? Well, 2 divided by 2 is just 1, right? So we take this number divided by 2, x plus 1 squared is the left side. And then 3 plus 1 on the right side is 4. And now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And so far so good. We've got perfect squares, and that's going to make things nice for us. But we're going to have x plus 1 is going to equal a positive, and I'm just going to go ahead and split it because I know there's going to be 2. So I'm going to have a positive 2, square root of 4 is 2, and a negative 2. So I know I'm going to have 2 equations to solve for. I've got a positive 2, and I have a negative 2. So I'm going to take the 1, subtract it from both sides, so x is going to equal 1. And I'm going to take this 1, subtract it from both sides, and x is going to equal a negative 3. And those should be my 2 solutions for number 8. Okay, again, all we did was complete the square, and then we used square roots to help us solve for x. All right, let's look at number 9. This is going to be one that doesn't come out to be, you know, a perfect number because it's going to be a decimal form. All right, so we're going to have 7 divided by 2 squared is going to give us our c term, right? What is that going to equal? It's 3.5 squared, so that's going to be 12.25. Right, we did that one on the previous page there, we had a one just like this. So we're going to have x squared plus 7x plus my c, 12.25. And then I have 30 on the right side, and because I've added 12.25 here, I'll have to add 12.25 here. Okay? Again, this c term is what we added to the left. Whatever we do there, we have to add to the right. Now, the factored form of this, we just take 7 divided by 2. So this is going to be x plus 3.5 squared. On the right side, we have to add this 12 in here. We're going to have 42.25. At this point, we can solve by taking the square roots of both sides. Alright, so I'm going to take the square root of this side and the square root of that side. And when I do that, I'm going to come up with x plus 3.5. Again, I know this is going to be a positive and negative, so I'm going to go ahead and set up two equations. X plus 3.5, and one will be equal to the positive version, one will be equal to the negative version. Possibilities here for the square root. When I take 42.25 and take the square root of it, I end up with 6.5. Okay, plus or minus, right? So I'm going to have 6.5 over here and a negative 6.5 on the right side. Okay, so I'm going to have both options, and I'm going to solve for both of those. Alright, so then I'm going to take this across. I'm going to minus 3.5. Take this across, minus 3.5. Alright, so then x is going to equal 3. Right? And then on this side, x is going to equal 9. Actually, 10. Is that right? 6.5 and 3.5 should give me 10. So I have 3 and I have 10. And those will be my answers for number 9. Does everybody kind of get the hang of what we're doing here? A little bit? Okay. Let me just work one more example because I feel like these are all pretty much the same. We're just completing the square, doing the square roots. I think you should be able to get more practice on this as you do your practice too. And so I don't think we have to go through all these examples, but let's do number 12 or number 11. Let's do number 11. So number 11, I'm going to complete the square. I've got a negative 12. I'm going to divide that by 2, square it. So that gives me a negative 6. I'm going to square that. It gives me a positive 36. Okay, positive 36. All right, and so I'm going to have x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals the 10 plus 36. Once again, I'm just adding that 36 term to both sides, which maintains equality there. My factored form of this side here, this completed square here, is now going to be x minus 6 squared. That's going to equal 10 plus 36, which is 46. And now I can solve by square rooting both sides. So I'm going to square root both sides. So I'm going to take x minus 6. It's going to equal, and we'll do this again. We're going to have a positive and negative version. So x minus 6 is going to equal the positive version, and the negative version or option for square root of 46. So square root of 46, when you round it, ends up being 6.78. And this one will just be negative 6.78. And we'll solve both of these sides here. So if I add 6 to both sides, and on this side again I'm going to add 6, and that'll help me get rid of this. I'm going to have x is going to equal 12.78. When I add 6 to a negative 678, I'm going to have negative 0.78. And those are my two answers or solutions for number 11. Okay? And I feel like this is probably enough examples for you. We can work on some more of this when we're doing the practice. I'm going to go ahead and let you turn you loose to work on your practice, and hopefully this has gotten you enough information to get you started. The first part's pretty simple. We're just completing the square to find the c. We're taking the middle term, that b term, Dividing by 2, squaring it, that gives us the C term. That's pretty simple. When we get into this part here, it's just adding that extra step to what we already know about solving by square roots. So we have to complete the square, then we can solve by square roots. I hope this has been a help to you, and have a great day.